This is an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
I've mentioned on many occasions that I'm a big fan of the CBS soap opera As the World Turns. I started watching the show when I was 4 with my mother, so do the math. I've watched that program for almost 50 years. The show is slated to go off the air in September, but what I wanted to talk about here is the passing of the Grand Dame of As the World Turns, Helen Wagner. It was back on April 2nd, 1956, that she uttered the very first words on the very first episode of that show. And in 2010, she was still on the show. Sadly, Helen passed away earlier this month at the age of 91. Growing up while watching her, she almost became like family, which is why I was so thrilled to have the chance to talk with her on the old radio show that I did for many years. It was June 8th of 1994 when Helen graced the airwaves of our show for a full hour. I thought at this time of her passing, I would play just a portion of that conversation. So here now is an edited version of my chat with the great Helen Wagner.
You have been around on that show for 38 years. As a matter of fact, I understand you spoke the very first words on that program.
Even before that, Mr. Holder, I made the pilot film, which sold the show, so I've been on it since before it went on the air.
Now, when you say the pilot film, what was that like?
What we did was to make put a show on kinescope. We didn't have tape back in those days, and they sold it. They sent it around as a selling piece, and Procter & Gamble got interested enough in it to put us on the air. We made that pilot film in November of 55, so this is all prehistory, lamb.
How did you get the role of Nancy Hughes?
Well, that was an interesting thing. I was working on The World of Mr. Sweeney with Charlie Ruggles. There were three of us who were running parts on Mr. Ruggles, who played a kind of scattergood Baines character, and I played his daughter, and a young boy by the name of Glenn Walken played my son, Charlie's grandson. Glenn was on Guiding Light at the time and doing both shows. Then after about 5 years, Mr. Ruggles decided that he wanted to go back to California, and neither Glenn nor I wanted to go with him. So Charlie said, all right, then he'd recast, but good luck, and hail and farewell, and off he went. And meanwhile, Glenn's mother said, Erna Phillips and Ted Corday, who were writing and producing and directing Guiding Light, were thinking of doing a half-hour show. See, up to that time, of all the soaps were 15 minutes, radio and television. And she said, why don't you call them up and say that you'd like to audition? So I did, and they did, and I did two stints on Guiding Light, one as a nurse with the words, how do you do, and another as a nurse saying, the patients are just down the hall. In addition to that, I did an audition with Don McLaughlin, who played Chris for so many years,
right.
Remember? And we did an audition for Erna and Ted over at the old CBS building. Meanwhile, you see, for 5 years they'd watched me do The World of Mr. Sweeney with Glenn and Mr. Ruggles. So they were thoroughly aware of everything that I might do in front of a camera or in the way I might take direction. That's how I got the job.
How has Nancy changed over the years?
Well, she's grown up, she's matured, she's mellowed, she's gotten less possessive of her family, and she's gotten a lot older. That's 39 years later.
Now, when you say possessive of her family, that's one thing people talk about when they talk about Nancy, that she did at one point become quite the busybody, looking after her children and getting in everyone's way.
Oh, yes. She, whatever was going to be done, she gave them great advice, whether they wanted to hear it or not. So I used to get great mail castigating me. Why don't you leave those kids alone? Let them do what they want to. Well, that was fine, just as long as people wrote, even if they didn't like it very much. As long as they wrote, you knew they were attending and were interested in the show.
Do you get a lot of mail over the years?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I don't get nearly as much as the younger kids do, of course. I get a steady line of mail, and I get it from all ages, which is very interesting. First, of course, I got it from just women. Now I get it from children of people who watch the show, and I get it now from grandchildren who watch the show.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people might not be familiar with your background besides the work you've done as Nancy Hughes. I understand you're originally from Lubbock, Texas?
Yes, my father was a doctor down there in the plains of West Texas.
How does someone from Lubbock, Texas end up on the boards in New York?
Gradually. I went to college in Illinois, and then my piano teacher brought me with her to New York to attend a master class with Abram Chasen's piano class, that was. And I graduated from college with a degree in music and a degree in drama. And after that summer in New York, I just decided, well, that's where I'd like to go. So Mother and Father said, well, all right, so I came. And I landed in New York on the wings of that hurricane of 1938, just about the time that Czechoslovakia fell. So It was a pretty exciting time. That's before your time.
The role you play, you have sometimes, and at least in the past, you've had some good sparring with Eileen Fulton, who plays Lisa. Now, and we were all waiting for it, I think, because I see them talking about the show on the computers when I go into the various forums, and people have been waiting for you to dump all over Ellen for a while, and a couple of weeks ago you did.
Yes.
Do you enjoy those type of scenes?
Oh, sure. Got a little something going, and a little conflict, or instead of just being sweetness and light, pouring coffee and opening doors and that sort of thing, you get to yell a little bit.
Was that a problem when when you look back at the first, as I mentioned earlier, the first time you were on the show, and the opening line, and we were talking about it off air earlier this afternoon. People were saying, "What was the first line?" I mentioned it being "Good morning, dear. What would you like for breakfast?" And a lot of the women say, "Gee, I don't know who would say that line today."
Well, you see, we've come a long way in these practically 40 years. Life has changed, and people have changed attitudes.
Did you ever during those years say, "Gee, let's bring Nancy a little more independent"? I mean, she is now, but that did take some time, didn't it?
Well, I wouldn't have said she wasn't independent. She was a figure of that. That's the way people behaved in those days.
Mm-hmm.
She was not under Chrissy's thumb by any means. She just was not one of those people who went out and got into civic affairs and ran the town. She stayed home and ran her home. As a matter of fact, Erna Phillips, who wrote us for 20 years, had Nancy staying at home to such a degree that she never wanted to go away on a vacation with Chris, which made it very difficult for Helen Wagner to get away on a vacation. Erna came up with sisters for me in Kansas City. So whenever I wanted to go away on a vacation, I'd go out and visit Pearl.
I see. Give us a little bit of an idea of how the show has changed from going from live to tape. How is that, and from a half hour to an hour, how has that changed what you do on a daily basis?
I think the biggest change over the years has been in the form of writing. For instance, when we went on the air with half an hour, we had, say, 4 scenes in the half hour. When we went hour, we had, maybe twice that many, but we had scenes beginning, middle, and end. And when they decided that the audience that they were aiming at was 30 years old and under, then they started doing more episodic writing. We would start off with the beginning of a scene, a flash to the middle of a scene that had come from the script of the day before, then come back to the middle of the first scene, then start another scene. So it's been, we play beginning, middle, and end of scenes all spread out through the whole script for the day, and it's much more episodic, which doesn't make for as much ease in playing the scenes for the actors, because you don't get started on a scene and able to play through to the denouement of that particular moment, that momentary idea. We have to do a part, then come back and do the next part, then come back and do another part. And I think that's the biggest change that's happened to us since we went on the air. course, one of the things that first we started off in black and white, then we went to color, and that was pretty exciting. And now it's ordinary. You look at black and white, and that looks rather strange and interesting. And we've gone from being able to, not being able to immediately look at the show, to now being able to see the show even as we do it with the monitors on the floor and so on, and also immediate tape. And so far as editing the shows go, they can now take a tape, rearrange all sorts of things in it without changing the original, so that they can see how they want to cut it and still not have to change it to that cutting. They can go back to the original and or go to their cutting as they choose, which to me is just magic. It's like being able to type out a whole page and rearrange anything on it that you want to without changing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made, of course, editing the show much, much easier and much more interesting.
How has it changed your day from the days when you had to do it live and the time you had to be at the studio to working now when it could go on for quite a while, I understand?
Yes. Well, when we first went on the air, we were due there at 7:30, and we stayed through air, which was 1:30 to 2. Then, if we were on the next day, we'd pick up again in half an hour and start on the rehearsals for the next day's show. So if you were on just that day, your day was 7:30 to 2, and you went home. No questions asked. Well, now, since we tape it, we're in at 7, and we do the majority of the script in the morning because people are fresher, of course. So I'll say maybe out of 24 scenes, we'll do 14 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon. We're supposed to be through with the morning at 1:30 and go into rehearsal for the afternoon show at 1:45, which we're supposed to finish at 6:30 that evening, if we're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Very often we'll go over. Sometimes when we've had big scenes and big weddings and that sort of stuff, we went as late as 7 o'clock the next morning one day, and the people who were doing the show for that particular day had to be ready to go. They left and went right into rehearsal for the next day. That's the worst we've ever done.
The regular actors go through a lot of dialogue. Where do you find the time in that long schedule to even rehearse or memorize your lines?
Memorizing is the easiest part of it.
Really?
Yeah, oh yes. As you go over your lines, whenever you read through them, that helps you start memorizing.
Is part of it due to the fact that you and so many of the other actors in the shows have played the characters for so long that you know to a certain degree how they're going to react to certain things?
That does make a great deal of difference. And if the dialogue isn't written in the way that you feel it should, we've always had the very great privilege of adjusting words, not ideas, but words. If certain words don't fall easily into your character's mouth, you can change those words, but you cannot change the idea. And that's been a great help.
A brief conversation with Helen Wagner from June of 1994. You can find the complete written transcript of that interview on my website. Just go to thestufffile.com to the What's On page for this show, which is number 0038, and you'll find the link to the transcript.
You've just heard an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder. To hear any or all of the full hour-long shows, visit thestufffile.com. Stuph is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's thestufffile.com. A presentation of Flying Fish Communications.